All right. Good morning, guys. I do realize that I am the only thing between us and lunch, so I'll try to be respectful of our 12 o'clock off time. I am very appreciative and very thankful that you invited me, that Martin invited me. I've been in communication with him. I teach a data analysis class at the University of North Dakota, and so I use the Open Sky data in R, and so it's very beneficial to that. But thank you for allowing me to come here and present to you open source flight data, free, but at what cost? A bit about me. I wanted to just be upfront. It's my first time joining your community, and just tell you about just quickly about my background, but then also my biases. All right, because we want to disclose that as researchers, and we want to be transparent about that. So the top line is my job. I'm an airline pilot, like I told you, but I'm also a flight data analyst. We have 15,000 pilots at our airline, 700 over 700 airplanes, and I am one of 8 people that has access to all the flight data. So I can link a name and I can link the flight data. Only 8 of us can do that. The company cannot do that. So that's another position that I hold, and it's very sacred and it's very confidential. And I'm very and so that's one hat that I wear, just so that you guys are aware. The second line down is that I work on behalf of our pilot union. We have 65,000 pilots, and we represent 40 airlines. So it's a huge swath of North American aviation, both Canadian and American. And I meet in conferences like you see in the middle right there, where we exchange information. We talk about threats that are coming up. We talk about data, FOQA, flight data management, open source data. So I have my ear to the floor when it comes to hearing what issues are coming up. So what I'm saying today isn't just James coming in and just spouting stuff. This is kind of what people are talking about in North America. The final line, like Professor Sun alluded to, is I just finished my PhD at University of North Dakota. It's a very large aerospace university. It's not as technical as it is here. It's a little bit more applied and practical. But 2 weeks ago, I got a picture there with my chair. I studied voluntary safety reporting. What are the differences between pilots, mechanics, air traffic controllers, and dispatchers when it comes to proclivity to voluntarily report? If you want the results, you have to read my dissertation. Just quickly about the background here, the outline. We're going to talk about a background, the whole new world, right? Kind of like Aladdin of data. What is considered proprietary versus open source data, challenging some assumptions that you may have, certainly assumptions that we have as airline people. We're going to move into the ethics of big data. This is something I have not heard talked about. I reviewed all previous years of Open Sky Network symposia, and I did not see anything talking about ethics or talking about kind of how that dimension of the conversation here. So that's a real fundamental, and that's the paper that I submitted is built on that. And then finally, at the end of the day, we want to have recommendations. We don't want to just complain. We want to try to have some pragmatic end to that. So let's talk about pyramids quickly. Again, I want to disclose my biases. I want to disclose kind of my perspective, right? We all know Maslow's hierarchy, right? Without our physiological needs, nothing else really matters, right? Unless you're fed and you're watered, you can't have the highest pinnacle there, which is transcendence. We all know that, right? It's all from high school. This is my hierarchy of needs. All right. A lot of the papers that we talked about are fascinating. I love talking about it. Eco shaming. Taylor Swift was playing this morning out in the hallway. They were playing her music, and it was like, I had that in my presentation. It must be an omen that things are going to go well. So, but all of these topics are what we're talking about here. Okay. And they're all valuable. I don't mean to say that eco shaming is less valuable, but this is just my perspective on it. Shout out what you think my bottom is. What do you guys think? Starts with an S. Yes, thank you. Was that the guy who was behind me looking at my PowerPoints as I was making them? Yes, it's absolutely safety. Because without safety, we can't have anything else. We can't have a conversation about anything else that's above that. We are a victim of our own success. In America, we haven't crashed a commercial airplane, passenger airplane, in 13 years. So we take for granted that aviation is so safe. 10 billion passengers have been transported in America in the past 13 years without a fatality. Actually, one fatality on Southwest. But without safety, we don't have anything else. So that's really all I care about. Okay, that's really my message here is safety. All this chatter, I just added this a few minutes ago. I have to give some kind of deference to this. Aviation is 2% of emissions. I'm not going to get into a conversation or a debate about this. I just want to at least give you guys food for thought. Road transport, over the road transport is 12%. Okay, so 6% more, 6 times more emissions are done with over the road transport. I would just submit to you as you go forward in your studies and in your career, remember that. Okay, it's totally worthy to be talking about emissions and all these things. From my perspective, I hope that there's 6 times as much research and academic interest in abating over the road transport emissions as there is in aviation. I believe that aviation is a very visceral activity. We see big airplanes lumbering over us, roaring, and so it's very easy to say, "Oh, yep, you know." So anyway, that's all I want. It just bugged me on that. I just want to get it off my chest. So that's all. A week and a half ago, this happened. Korean Air 330 overran in the Philippines, and how many fatalities were there? 0. It's incredible. Okay, it's absolutely incredible. They ran over a ditch a couple 100 meters away from a gas station, and a complete catastrophe. This just reminds us how amazingly safe aviation is. That this can happen. This airplane is actually still sitting there right now. They're pulling it apart, selling it for scrap metal. But this can happen, and maybe you didn't even hear about it. It's unbelievable. Just a couple days ago. Okay, but as soon as it happened, we got ADS-B data on it. And people start maybe drawing conclusions, or at least proposing, oh, well, it looks like that they did a missed approach 2 times. Looks like they came in low the 3rd time. They touched down here on the runway, all based on ADS-B data. Sadly, they're making conclusions based on that. Okay, but that's only human, right? That's the society and the world that we live in today, is we get the data and we try to make conclusions on it. You look at something like this, and that's pretty sexy. Oh, well, why did they take a right hand holding pattern, not a left hand, and all this stuff based on ADS-B data, okay? So the Boeing MAX crashes. Let's talk about ADS-B data there. The Boeing MAX crashes, as soon as the second crash happened, the media or somebody, I'm not quite sure who, starts superimposing ADS-B data on top of each other. And they note that the second, oh, this is so cool, that the second one basically has characteristics of the first, okay? And this went to NASA, this went to Boeing, all this data got fed in there before they got the flight data recorder. Based on the ADS-B data, they made conclusions that said we need to pull down the entire program. Okay, we need to stop that, and then they got the flight data recorder, and that actually affirmed the ADS-B data. So I'm not saying the ADS-B data is invalid by any means. I'm just letting you know that ADS-B data has now eclipsed, oftentimes, what the flight data recorder is telling us, and it's very immediate, so it's easier to do that. Okay, so. This is a great real world example of that. So when this happened, from my position that I've told you at my airline and with my pilot union and then my academic hat that I wear, I wrote an article, okay, up on the left here. And if you've never heard of Hindsight Magazine, it's a phenomenal magazine that's written by sponsored by Eurocontrol, and it's all about air traffic management. So I would Google Hindsight Eurocontrol right now, and I would just have that as a window on your computer and look at it sometime, because it's a wonderful magazine. The guy who runs it, Steve Shorrock, is a friend of mine, and it's just a phenomenal publication. So I wrote this about a year and a half ago because I already was predicting, kind of based on ADS-B stuff, that this was going to be an issue in the industry. Okay, it's a very short article. It's barely peer reviewed, we'll call it that. So I wrote that article, and then on the right side, what you see up here is an event that happened a few months later into San Francisco. An aircraft is approaching. They do a double missed approach, and then they divert to Oakland. And we all know FlightAware, right? Everybody is very well aware of what FlightAware is. So kind of this happened first on the left, and then this event happened on the right. I'm just going to show you, this is a 15-minute video. We're certainly not going to watch the whole thing, but I'm just going to play for you a couple of excerpts of this. That event made it onto YouTube, where it has almost 100,000 hits. And this same person, I don't know who it is, has a whole litany of videos on YouTube where they take the voice transcriptions and they tether it to the ADS-B data, and then they have, and then hundreds of people make comments about how bad the pilots were, and I'm never going to fly that airline again. So let's just get a flavor here.
Clear line 10 left, Delta 311 Heavy. Delta 311 Heavy is going around.
So 311 Heavy, arrested, flight level dismissed.
Flight level dismissed, Delta 311 Heavy.
So 311 Heavy, when you have a chance, say reason.
Stand by.
So 311 Heavy, contact NorCal 135.1.
135.1 for Delta 311 Heavy. And SoCal Delta 311 Heavy is with you over the field at descending down to 4,000.
Staff 2, contact San Francisco.
Second approach.
Delta 311 Heavy is outside Sat 2.
So 311 Heavy, San Francisco, contact turn, issued by Heavy 777, short final, wind 0209, running 10 left for land.
Clear line 10 left, Delta 311 Heavy. Delta 311 Heavy going around.
So 311 Heavy, roger, flight level dismissed.
All dismissed, Delta 311 Heavy. Delta 311 Heavy, just to give you an update here, we're getting ground proximity warning, which is a mandatory go-around on our end. So we'd like to hold for just a few minutes, or just vector us preferably, and we're going to come up with a game plan.
So 311 Heavy, okay. We'll pass that information along to NorCal, and you go ahead and contact them at 135.1. Thanks for the update.
So. We're determining that right now with the company for Delta 311 Heavy, and if you're offering us runway 19, we need to consider the last ones that we had were 040 at 14, which may exceed the tailwind component. Okay, that helps, but we'll let you know it's probably going to be Oakland, San Jose, or we'll try a different runway at San Francisco, but we'll advise you. Delta.
So the aircraft proceeds like we saw on the FlightAware track, and it comes back around. It diverts right here into Oakland. Okay, so that video made it almost made the nightly news, but it got, like I said, almost 100,000 hits within a couple of days. Hundreds of people commenting on it. These pilots suck. I'm never going to fly Delta again, so on and so forth. Did that voice sound familiar to you? That was me. I got open sourced. So that entire transaction, everything that you just saw right now, I mean, I wrote an article 6 months prior to that about what would happen if ADS-B data and all this stuff got together, and then it frickin' happens to the person who works for the pilot union, and I mean, it's just, you can't write it. It's unbelievable. So this happened to me, and it was a crazy night. I only have a few minutes here, so we're not going to go too far into it. But just suffice to say that this is like a once-in-a-lifetime crazy alignment of the planets that this actually ended up happening to that. So just to blaze through some of these slides here, in traditional flight safety management, we need to understand that there's a formalized process. It's called a safety management system. Flight data comes off the airplane. DFDR, QAR, something like that. Somebody downloads it, or it's cellular, it's read, and then it's reported out. Okay, it's a circular kind of process that we have in flight data management. there's many different sources of data, and I'm preaching to the choir here. Some of you, I'm not an expert in this at all, but you guys are. Just a smattering of some of the different possibilities that we have of data sources. But today, it's incredible because all of these are open source. And if I showed you this slide just a few years ago, there wouldn't be as many green circles. Okay. But now there's a lot. And I would imagine next year if I come back, there's going to be more green circles. Okay. But this is unbelievable how many sources are open source. And for us, you're probably saying, yeah, James, that's amazing, man. Just bring it on. I want more everything. Hold that thought. So in America, just to give you an idea here, we have something called voluntary safety programs. Okay, all airlines have to be part of a voluntary safety program. The one that says FOQA is our flight data monitoring program, which is a memorialized formal process that has been blessed by the FAA. And I'm not saying that correlation means causation, so please, like, I understand a little bit of statistics, but all of these programs came online, and this is the accident rate from World War II to COVID, and we've seen this huge drop in our accident rate. I'm just going to go ahead and submit that I think it's partially attributable to our voluntary safety programs, to this culture of non-punitive action that we have, that we've set up in the United States regulatory environment, okay? But like I said, the red one right there particularly pertains to this formalized process of flight data management that we have. So what does that actually look like? All airlines, charters, what we call Part 91, general aviation, flight training, helicopters, emergency management folks, every single person here as of a month ago, this is the list. They all feed their flight data into one repository. And the one repository is run by a it's a disinterested third party. It's like NASA. Okay, think of it like that. They have no financial stake in this. It's funded by the FAA. So this is where we go to get our data. And we can, think about benchmarking. If I want to know a touchdown point on a runway, I can benchmark it against a zillion different airlines, operators, all this stuff. So we are very fortunate to have this. It's called ASIAS, the ASIAS database. And if you're part of an airline, as long as you contribute data, you can retrieve data for free. All right. So this is unbelievable, the architecture that we have set up, that we have for us available there. So what's available today? And again, preaching to the choir here with ADS-B data, but all these things on the left-hand side are available in ADS-B land, right? Things like airspeed and bank angle can be derived, right? If I know the air mass velocity, I can probably approximate an airspeed, not just the ground speed. The top left corner is in France. This is just an example of decibel levels, overflight real time. Apparently they can issue fines or they can do things based on exceedance of decibel levels. ACARS data is open source. Right here, a recent study looked at ADS-B data in Squawk 7700 events, which is what? What's a 7700? An emergency, right? So they cast a net over I think it was 3 years. They said, who's squawked in emergency? They had about 1,500 responses. What did they use to validate if it was an actual emergency? What's the icon? Twitter. As long as somebody tweeted, hey man, the engine's on fire on my airplane and we're returning back to Bucharest, it was a validated squawk. It was a validated event. This is a peer-reviewed journal, okay? I'm not saying that this shouldn't be done. Please don't get me wrong. I'm just saying it's a whole new world now that we're peer reviewing data based on Twitter. That's the validation technique, peer-reviewed journal. So suffice to say that on the left is things that in the United States is protected, that I have codified, memorialized agreements that I'm not going to get punished. And on the right-hand side is everything else. So this balance is rapidly shifting. Of what it used to be, everything was protected, and now pretty much everything is not protected. So think of it like a scale balancing over. Okay, and there's my scale slide. All right, so you get the idea. And of course, the reason why we're here is this ADSB idea, is that this proliferation, millions and millions of flights, billions of data points is just absolutely tipping the scales in the direction of non-protected. And keep in mind, those voluntary safety programs I told you about, the reason why we have those is because everything is protected. We feel comfortable reporting because we know we're protected. Now our clothes are being taken off one garment at a time. In flight data, we only get protection when we have a focal program, or what you call flight data management. Okay, that's the only time we're protected. So ADSB data is not protected. So if you bring that into an airline and you say, well, it looks like the go around was at 200 feet, and that's open source data, and it conflicts with other data sources like the flight data recorder, I don't think it really would, but let's just say hypothetically it does. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if that safety report will be tossed out, if the pilot's subjected to punishment. We just don't know. Okay, it's a whole new world because only focal data is legally protected. And it's only protected actually when you share it with the FAA through your safety management system. How do you share FlightAware 24 data with the FAA? They can just go on whenever they want to and look at it. Okay. I'm going to go fast through this, but this is just to say that new technology, think about the young generation, think about the 20-somethings that are coming up in aviation. They're very, very comfortable sharing data, at least with, on a certain level. But think about Fitbits, think about dashboards. We all know about that. Garmin has a brand new watch that, of course, you can track your heart rate, monitor all these things, and then you have your dashboard, see your sleep quality, see your beats per minute. Well, Garmin, what do they make? Yeah, avionics, stuff like that, right? So that same watch, you can get NextRad radar on it, live NextRad radar. You can actually track your localizer deviation. Okay, this is real. So you're flying your airplane and you're like, oh, I got to turn left 5 degrees. I mean, I don't even know physically how it's possible, but this is real. Okay, this is flight data, guys. All right. So you're thinking like, well, open source, the ADSB and air traffic control tapes. I mean, this is the direction that it's going, and this isn't theoretical. This is real. What does that actually mean? What are these pilots going to expect? Their data is certainly not going to be protected. Um, it's a whole new world out there. Decentralization of flight data. I'm going to go a little bit past 12. Is that okay? Like 05 maybe, 07. Flight data is being decentralized. And for the most part, decentralization is just a byproduct of the society that we live in, right? The earth is getting flatter, right? These crazy lunatics have the same internet that you do, and they can, have conspiracy theories, and now those are getting all this, they're sucking a lot of the air out of the room right now in American politics, right? Um, so, but this decentralization of flight data, right? I can go on and you guys have probably seen this. I think this is Flight Radar 24. But I could just set up some certain alerts. I can set up, if the foot per minute is a certain parameter on the right hand. This is a focal program, guys. This is what I do for my airline, and it costs millions of dollars for us to pay for that. This is free. Or well, let's say it's a menial subscription every month. If I was an airline, what would I be thinking about? Do I pay GE $3 million a year for a subscription, or do I just, have something on ADSB Exchange, or I set up some algorithm on Open Sky Network and save a ton of money? Scary. And that would take us out of the loop. Labor would be out of the loop. It'd just be a company thing to do. So personalized flight data is another huge area as well too. So flight data at your fingertips. Flight data at your fingertips. This is just being rolled out to my airline. Emirates has it. British Airways has had it for a while. A lot of groups have had it for a while. But basically, the pilot, after they land, they can review their flight data real time. Okay, it's a proprietary flight data, but it's not really vetted by the pilot union or people like me. It goes right from the cloud or the cellular uplink into the pilot's hands. Fuel burn, efficiency, touchdown point. Some of them you can actually see an animation of your landing. Okay, had happened 10 minutes ago, and I'm going to watch the animation and the touchdown and the G-force and all these parameters. It's unbelievable. It's a great development. Don't get me wrong, but it's the problem is about the validity of the data. Okay, it hasn't gone through the same robust system that we have generally with our safety management systems in our FOCA programs. Okay, it's a whole new world. So what would happen? I mean, let's actually have a real scenario so you guys can, have something tangible here. There's a rejected takeoff, and let's say we saw yesterday like ADS-B on the ground, right? Let's say that Dallas Fort Worth has a very good ADS-B on the ground, so we can say it's pretty valid, And I'm the company, and I say, hey, you know what? You aborted your takeoff at 84 knots. Okay, because that's what the ADS-B data says. But the pilot says, actually, no, it was 120 knots or 110 knots or some other airspeed because, right, airplanes are built on airspeed, not ground speed, right? So and this isn't a real thing, but this has happened numerous times in the industry now in America, where the company says, well, I see this, but the pilot says no, it was actually something really, really different, and then you have to reconcile that. It's a whole like learning curve for the company to say that your ADS-B data actually isn't the reality that the pilot saw. What would happen if the pilot actually submits a report that says I aborted my takeoff at 120 knots, but this says 84, and the FAA comes in, and it's a 75-year-old FAA guy. He can't even spell ADS-B, but he sees two different data sources. Well, you can reject a report based on falsification. Maybe the pilot, anyway, it's a whole rabbit hole that is possible. It's incredible. I'll skip over that. So we're in the Netherlands, right? We love bikes, and certainly that's just the bike pretty much hasn't changed in over 100 years. 1890 was called the decade of the bicycle craze. So they really haven't changed, right? Even today, this is the Netherlands. Okay, I have to dodge them constantly walking here every morning. But I mean, come on, for 130 years it hasn't changed, right? So this, I think, is actually a perfect metaphor for where we are with flight data, because in the upper right-hand corner was a bike outside of my hotel in New York on Monday, and I had to Google this thing. Top speed about 45 miles an hour. It has almost the endurance as a Tesla. That's how far it can go, like 300 miles on a charge. I mean, and so this is almost a weapon of war. I mean, it's unbelievable. So think about the evolution of the bike, and then all of a sudden in 2022 we have this rapid thing, and then that's the streets of New York City, and there's e-bikes coming everywhere. The technology has outpaced the regulation. Okay, these bikes are on the frickin' sidewalk. Okay, it's not like here where I see people are very, professional, and they're in their bike lane and all that stuff. I mean, these e-bikes in New York City, please, if you go there, I mean, it's crazy. It's so dangerous right now. Okay, and there's no law. I looked into it. There's no law about it, or if it is, it's not enforced. I don't know, but the technology has outpaced the regulation. Okay, well, the same thing I would offer is true with flight data. I'm sorry, is true with flight data, because the flight data, I mean, if you think about airplanes have been around basically as long as the bicycle has, right? But only until very, very recently have we had this explosion of open source data. All right. And like I said, the technology has outpaced the regulation, okay, because it's not protected. There's a new world about the ethics of big data, and just so you're aware, if you're in a academic type of a library, you can Google these things. But generally, it focuses on kind of like the Googles and the Facebooks and stuff like that. But I did a literature review of this for my paper, and it pretty much all applies to us. It applies to what we're doing with flight data and with ADS-B data. And this woman named Shannon Valor at Edinburgh has robust literature, not specifically about aviation, but it's really, really good stuff. This whole world about data ethics. So one of the issues that we have quickly is what is data? What is considered data? Is ACARS considered flight data? If people use Wi-Fi on the airplane, is that considered flight data? Right? I want to say yes. As a labor person, it should all be data, everything, because then it's protected, right? Is engine health monitoring data considered flight data that I have domain over? Again, I would say yes. Well, James, it's de-identified. I mean, come on. I mean, ADS-B data. It's I'm just looking at the tail. I mean, obviously you can see the date and all this stuff. But in the airline world, people say, well, it's de-identified, right? Actually, come on. You can reverse engineer a lot of this stuff and find out. At my company, technically, all they can see is the month and the tail number. They actually can't see the date of a flight. But come on. It's just like what you guys were talking about. It's like with the private jets. I mean, come on. I mean, you can track the address of the person who operates that. Even if they want to hide, you can find it. So this whole thing about confidentiality and de-identification, it's out the window, I would say. And then with flight data, all of these things on the bottom here are companies that want to monetize flight data management. So it's a very interesting phenomenon right now because you have the open source community, which the journal yesterday is like a revelation. Thank you so much for that. And then you have this whole group of companies that want to take your flight data and you pay to play. So it's a very interesting convergence that's happening right now in the industry. Okay, because why? The Europeans, Asians, Australians, they don't have that repository that I showed you, that ASIAS repository. They don't have that. So the only way to benchmark your data off of other groups is to pay to play in one of these vendors. All right. I would offer that that's not the best solution because then you can't benchmark around with everybody else. Just some ethics of big data. I'll try to wrap it up here. I had a case study here. I'm going to completely skip that. Redistribution of power. So there's a perception in big data that, oh, Facebook is giving me the power to go into my settings and I can choose who sees my feed and all this stuff. And there's an illusion of empowerment. All right. That people are, that the earth is flattening and all this stuff. But when actually the theory is that actually it's still the companies that are going to monetize your data. They're still seeing who your network friends are, and they're still giving you ads in your feed based on your proclivities. All right. Another principle that they want us to keep with us is that humans should always be able to trump the AI. All right, this kind of the Boeing versus Airbus philosophy. Boeing says that the pilots are smarter than the airplane, and Airbus thinks the opposite. But with big data ethics, they say that even if you're using AI, the humans should still be part of the loop on that one. And then, of course, confidentiality. All right, this idea that try your best to maintain confidentiality. Almost done. Traditional safety management looks at aggregate data, looks at the big picture. People like me are an essential stakeholder in that, memorialized agreements. And this last thing about latency, okay, that's actually a good thing in safety management, data latency. Why? Because the data comes in, we validate it. Sometimes we see airplanes flying upside down for 2 hours. Okay, if that's not validated, that becomes part of your data. All right, and it's not. I don't have to tell you that that's not good. But this idea about latency is generally a good thing from our perspective. The problem is that in the future, just like I showed you with my event, okay, you have these I wouldn't even call my event high profile. We did a bunch of go arounds. We went to Oakland. Everything was fine. I mean, there was no exceedance. Everything was completely normal. But these high profile events suck the air out of the room, okay? Because we don't crash airplanes anymore. So when little things, somebody throws a drink and they're drunk on the airplane, that takes a lot of the media attention in aviation right now, okay? And that's not good. This decentralization, and then of course there's always going to be a rush to judgment on that. You can read my paper about my recommendations, so I'm not going to read the PowerPoint here, but they're basically based on the things that I had set up for you right now. Thank you very much. I know that I've got into lunch a little bit. This is a little bit different than maybe the other modules that you had, but this is the world that I live in. I hope that you can see how ADS-B data and open source data is putting pressure on traditional safety management. I want this to be successful. I want to be part of the solution, but hopefully you can at least share with me the problems that we've identified. Thank you.